Hi guys, it's Stephanie with So Make It. I'm going to be making some gift card holders today. The pattern is by AppleGreen Cottage, and I'll provide the link in the description box below. This is just a nifty little way to make your gift card gifts a little more personal. They're really cute. You can use any fabric selection. You could go for a birthday or graduation, weddings, whatever. You can choose whatever print you want, any occasion. I've used some red twine for the loop on the ones that I have made previously. For the purpose of this video, I am actually going to use just some little white elastic. I didn't have any blue or white ribbon on hand. So you can really use anything. You could use jute twine if you're going for farmhouse. It's wide open. If you choose to have the loop, you can be creative and use anything you want. The pattern calls for 2 pieces of fabric to be cut mirrored, one for the exterior, one for the interior, and one for the interfacing. I'm using Pellon 809. It's a fusible interfacing. Because I'm going to cut several out, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take my fabric and I'm going to fold it over, and this will put 2 right sides together. So I'm just going to flatten it out. I really should press this, but I didn't. So you'll just fold it over, lay the pattern piece down, and then you'll cut it out. You'll have your 2 mirrored pieces cut. I just used a rotary cutter to cut mine out. You can use scissors, whatever, and you'll just cut around the pattern. And then I'm not showing myself cutting the interfacing, but I did cut the interfacing the same way. I just cut several pieces of interfacing. So I have the back and the front. They're mirrored, and I've already attached my interfacing there. So you can see that, they're right sides together. And the interfacing is out of the seam line, so you won't have a bulky seam line whenever you're sewing. It won't be difficult to turn. So I really suggest using that outline that's provided in the pattern for the interfacing as well. I've cut a little piece of elastic. I used about 3 inches. That gives me a nice loop and gives me a little bit of a tail to have sticking out, so I can make sure that I can see and catch it when I sew the loop. I'm just going to make the loop and put it on the right side of fabric in between the 2 pieces, the right side facing when we go to sew them together. Then I'm just going to pop a clip in to hold that elastic. You can definitely pin all the way around, but I found when I was making big batches of these that as long as I have my starting corner lined up, my starting 2 corners lined up, everything else lines up perfectly. I didn't find it necessary to pin, but you definitely can. And for this, since the pattern calls for a 1/4 inch seam allowance, I will use my 1/4 inch foot just to guide me and make sure my seams are consistent. It just has a little guide to keep you consistently at a 1/4 inch. I'll just pop that on the machine. And I always check to make sure my needle goes down in the hole for the 1/4 inch foot. I've broken a needle when I've been doing zigzags on a previous projects, or had my needle shifted a different way. If it doesn't go right down in that hole, you'll break a needle real quick. So I'm just going to start about a 1/4 inch in from the edge, and I like to start from the top just to get that elastic done and out of the way. I don't have to worry with it anymore. I'm going to take the clip off and kind of pinch my elastic together. And when I start sewing, I'm going to back stitch just to secure the seam, and I'll lift the presser foot up just to get it over that little piece of elastic so it doesn't pull it or push it to the side. And then I'll just backstitch a couple of times over the elastic just to make sure it's secure. If anybody pulls on it, I don't want it to come out. When I get to the corner, about 1/4 of an inch from the edge of fabric, I'm going to just put my needle down and turn. And the fabric's lining up with that little guide on my foot. I'm going to do the same thing for each corner. Needle down and turn. Needle down and turn. And now I'm at the point where I'm going to leave the opening to turn. So I am going to backstitch a couple of times just to secure that seam. I'll trim my thread, put it back on the machine. I'm leaving about 1 inch to 1.5 inches opening to turn the project right side out. When I start again, I will backstitch, and this just again secures the seam, so when you're pulling on it to turn it out, it's not going to rip the seam open. Add another corner, so needle down and turn. And then my personal preference is just to go ahead and turn and go about 3 or 4 stitches in to my starting point. That's just something that I prefer to do. And now I'm ready to just trim it up and clip the corners, and we'll be ready to turn it. So I've got it all trimmed, and this is what you have. Something, if you decide to make these, you'll have something that looks like this. Looks like I got a little bit small on my interfacing on that cut. Guilty of cutting multiple things and cutting that pattern down a little bit as I went, so be careful with that. Don't do as I did. I'm just going to clip those corners, just being careful not to cut into my stitching. Right side out, so I'll just open it up and push the fabric through. Now it's pretty well turned out. I'm just going to take an ink pen. I just have a friction pen that has a pretty blunt tip. I have the pen, of course, inside. I don't have it open to write. And I'm just going to push those corners out where I couldn't get it with my fingers very well. So I just want to have some nice corners. I'm just going to push them out. Make sure I like the way it looks, and then I'm just going to turn the opening in, and then I'm just going to slide over to the ironing board for a moment and just kind of press that down just to give it a nice look. So here it is pressed, and then I'm going to decide which way I want the fabric to show, because my fabric has print and I have upside down. They're going, the deer and the bears are going every different way. So I just kind of look at it and decide which way I want the front of the gift card holder to be. For this one, I've decided my bear is going to be right side up, so I'll do it that way. And an optional step that isn't necessary by any means, but I like the way the top stitching looks. So I am going to top stitch that edge before I finish the project off. I'm just going to take my 1/4 inch foot off and just use my regular presser foot. And then I'm going to start about 1/8 or 1/4 of an inch, just however you decide to top stitch. As long as it's consistent, and you catch that bottom to close, it doesn't matter what your top stitching is. But I did a little less than 1/4 of an inch, and about 1/4 of an inch in from each edge. And now I've top stitched across the fold where the gift card holder will fold over. I just like the way it looks. Again, it's completely not necessary. It's just a step that you can do if you like the way it looks. So I'm going to go ahead and fold it over and then top stitch all the way around. When you're top stitching around this time, it's going to close that opening. So I will start at the bottom, that way I know it's closing the opening well, and I don't have to worry about if I shift the fabric a little bit, I know I have that opening closed up. Get my threads out of the way. And same thing goes with this. When I get to the corner, I just put my needle down and turn. I use just under 1/4 of an inch seam allowance for this. Again, the top stitching, as long as you're consistent, as long as you catch your opening, it doesn't really matter the width of the stitch for the top stitching. We'll get it trimmed up. And there you have a cute little gift card holder. You just put the card in there. It holds pretty tight. I can turn it upside down and shake it. I don't have a grasp on the corner of the card at all, and it doesn't fall out. This is pretty secure. So I want to thank AppleGreen Cottage for allowing me to present the video, and you guys check them out, and thank you for watching. Like and subscribe, and I'll see you again next time.